All right, so let's get super casual. Tell us your name, title, company.
Kevin Lenane, PSA president.
Pretty substantial name in the industry. Let's talk. Let's talk a little bit about how you got involved. You look like a young guy. How'd you get involved in the space? What's your interest, and then how'd you get on board with PSA?
Yeah, I've been a collector forever. I collect, vintage cards, modern cards. I also collect vintage computers, which is a stranger one. But I basically collected since I was 5, 6 years old. My background's actually in machine vision and computer vision. I built 2 or 3 companies in the machine vision space. And basically a couple years ago, I sort of saw what was happening in grading. I thought, I can really use my experience to put some technology towards this. Built a company called Geniment, built a pretty compelling demo to digitally grade cards, and then that company was acquired by PSA last year in March. I ran the product division at PSA through October, and then became president in October, and I've been the president since October of last year.
And that's of the holding company as well as PSA?
No, Nat Turner is the CEO of the holding company. I am the president of PSA.
And tell us about, well, congratulations on all that. Tell us about, so your passion, what's that like for you to be in an industry that you've been passionate about forever and now be, frankly, an industry leader and a brand that's probably most recognizable in the space? What's that like for you?
It's incredible. I mean, it's truly a blend of like my skill set and my passion. It's amazing. I mean, sometimes when I'm at PSA, I'm like, is this really work? Like I came here, I'm like, does this really work? I'm like shopping for cards. Like, how is this professional development? And so it's amazing. I love it.
And what do you say to any of those naysayers, like maybe my wife, that's telling me that, hey, you're collecting cards, you're prospecting, you're doing whatever you're doing. Is it a real business? How is it a business? Let's talk a little bit more about the business of the business.
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, hobbies are underrated in our culture. Like they are time for yourself, right? Any hobby, anything you collect, it's time for yourself. And cards happen to be something that are scarce enough that it can be personal enjoyment and it can also be an investment. I think that's kind of an amazing thing, right? There are some hobbies, knitting, that you might not, make a fortune out of, but this is a hobby where you may actually wind up netting a pretty substantial income. I think that's pretty amazing, right? So if something that brings you joy also happens to be an amazing business, it's pretty fortunate.
What are you seeing as trends? PSA sits at the intersection of, frankly, the velocity of the marketplace, especially at the high end, in sports card collectibles and other collectibles. Tell us about the future of the business, where you're seeing it going, some metrics even that you're seeing inside.
Yeah, I would say we're seeing, more so than ever, TCG. Trading cards, like everything from Pokemon to MetaZoo. Lots of TCG, for sure. I think games are just at their beginning. They're just at the sort of supernova of growth. I think graded games and all different categories of graded games is also another one that's going to kind of take off over the next few years.
A couple of examples of graded games.
Well, graded games, so like Mario 3, right? WATA Mario 3, that's like a classic one. I'm a big Zelda guy, so Zelda's another one that's, I think both Mario 3 and Zelda have hit over 1 million, which, 5 years ago is unheard of. But there's a whole category of games that don't really get graded, right? PC games. I collect games that were like on the Apple II and Macintosh, and you don't really get them graded yet. There's no market for them. So there's still, unlike cards, which are pretty well graded and well researched and kind of into the market, there's tons of stuff in the gaming space that's kind of outside the market right now, but waiting its turn to get in. So that's really exciting. We have a lot of international expansion coming up. We've got stuff planned in Europe and Tokyo. I think that's going to be really exciting, and it'll be interesting to see like the cultural differences. The demand on quality in certain cultures is much higher than our own, and so it'll be really interesting to see how like same-day grading functions in Tokyo versus Europe versus Canada versus the U.S. There's a lot of stuff like that coming up too.
Same-day grading. Where are we going with that?
That's why I love show grading, because the experience of handing your card in and getting it back later in a whole new form is amazing. I want to do more shows this year. That's the way we do in the U.S. That's the way we do same day grading. You can come to Santa Ana. It's it's not a cheap tier, but at shows we can do it. And I love the experience, especially for new collectors. Of here's my card. I get it back in this shiny new package with this shiny new label. We want to do a lot of that this year.
Yeah, it makes sense. And being tactile, right? I mean,
exactly.
Talking about the transition of so many things going digital, being on different platforms, but being in that metaverse, so to speak. This is still tactile. It's still tangible. It's still something you can hang on to, even with the vault business, where it still exists somewhere else. It's still something physical. Talk a little bit about that and the value of physical versus digital.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's almost like a commodity sense to it, meaning you've got this like asset that even if you abstract it and put an NFT deed on it, right? At the end of the day, you still have something physical. It's like gold-backed currency, And so if you think of like cards, this is a little bit out there, but if you think of cards as kind of like the commodity backing for athletes, right? Like you've got this base layer of cards that are worth something, and so no matter how much hype goes up and down, there's like this base layer of physical assets that are always going to have some value. And it also is like it's a good counter to like the NFT craze, right? Where you've just got this digital image stored like a piece of crypto. Here you've got something you can hold and put up on your wall, and like there's big, there's an 8x10 holder. It looks like a poster. It's, there's a lot there, and I think it's nice to have both, I would say.
I'm going to ask you a sustainability question. Answer it however. Okay. Lots of plastic, right? How do we mitigate that? What are we doing to create kind of more bioplastic involvement?
Yeah. So part of our holder R&D is to try and figure out how we can recycle them more. So, they are technically recyclable. I mean, you can put them, if you crack your slab out, you can put them in your plastic bin. But we want to get better about, how do we produce stuff that's kind of more sustainable. Yeah, I mean, biodegradable is going to be tough with security, but that's part of the R&D process. How are we more environmentally friendly? How do we produce more security? How do we prevent fake slabs like we talked about in the panel? How do we ID a slab and match to the cert number and match to the card? Those are all things we want to do. They all just take a long time. That kind of R&D, the materials R&D takes the longest.
Really interesting. Anything that you see, how do you see the future of the marketplace or the business in general, the hobby, as in more and more investors come in, as Blackstone comes in, as all these large institutions are taking control? You guys are now, part of a private equity outfit as well. So future of the business, where's it going? How's it getting bigger?
Yeah, I mean, I think thinking about cards and being able to transact on them and not necessarily needing them physically, at least not right away, right? The investor subgroup is really prone to vaulting because they don't want to pay taxes and shipping and all these things. So I think as the market grows in that area, it kind of grows alongside sports. Like if you think about the interest in sports in our culture, right? That kind of card investment should mirror that market. So I think there's going to be a lot of physical vaulting and using technology to deed things and transfer things back and forth. I think that's going to be really important. I am still going to want my own cards. I like my stuff, but I think there are going to be a lot of people, particularly the younger generation. I'm 41. People that are 20, 25, they might not need all their stuff, and so I think, even though I said this about physical collectibles, there is a generation of people that's very used to not holding these kinds of physical assets.
What do you think? Good stuff. Any final thoughts? I mean, what's missing? Well, okay, so this is still a fragmented business, right? When you look at this in comparison to other industries that are out there, we've been interviewing CEOs for over a dozen years across industry. I mean, where do you see the opportunity, the arbitrage, what tech is missing?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely tech missing on the low end. I think you should be able to transact raw cards using technology. There's a certain number where you don't transact in a grading ecosystem. You should be able to transact reliably with trust using technology. So there's that. I also would really love to see more, I'm really excited to see what Josh does, at Fanatics, because he's super creative, and like that's what's missing. I think in a lot of ways is we had two dominant companies. I really want to see creativity, like just crazy sets and trying new things, and not just another refractor basketball set, like just different stuff. Like I met some guy here. He showed me a card with gold inside. Like I love that. Whatever wood cards. I don't know. Like just trying new things and sort of experimenting and being creative. That's, I think, a big opportunity for these kind of newly acquired card companies.
QR codes. I mean, you guys were innovators in using QR codes. See big opportunities for those on card potentially down the
line? So, I mean, I think any way we can better secure the cards, I would love to see, official images coming from the manufacturers for patch cards. Just this whole issue of patch swapping has become a thing, and I think there's just a ton of room for both creativity on the artistic side and creativity operationally. Like, how do you secure these cards? How do you make sure they are originals and not backdoored, and QA versions and whatever? So there's tons there. I think I would say this generally as a person of decades of business experience, creativity is super underrated just in general.
Yeah, agreed. And this is a creative space. Also, my boy Andy Redmond used to run. I have lunch with him on Wednesday.
Yeah. I would say start with wax. I think a lot of people start with wax. It's fun. You never know what you're going to get, and you can use that to learn about the hobby. Like go to get a modern set. If you watch a sport, get that set. If you don't, buy a few packs, open them, and then kind of research, see what you like, see what what the value of them is, and then I think that's like a great place to start. Packs are such a great experience because it's got the excitement of the unknown. There's some value there. You get a good sense of things. So I would always start with wax.
Awesome. Thanks, Bubba.
Cool.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.